What if I told you that one of the newest AI billionaires in the world wasn't raised in luxury, wasn't surrounded by investors, and didn't grow up with connections, but instead was raised with pressure, expectations, and the quiet fear of falling behind? Because before Brendan Foody built an AI company worth billions, before investors called him a prodigy, before Silicon Valley took him seriously, he was just a kid trying to figure out how to survive in a world moving too fast. And like most billionaire stories, it didn't start with money. It started with mindset. Most people think billionaires are created in boardrooms. They're not. They're created much earlier. At the dinner table, in small apartments, in difficult conversations. In moments where parents say, work harder, do better, don't waste opportunities, because children don't grow into pressure, they grow from pressure. And Brendan's early environment quietly built something rare. Not confidence, not hype, but urgency. From a young age, he understood something most kids don't. Nobody is coming to rescue you. If you want something, you build it. If you don't understand something, you learn it. If you fail, you don't complain, you adjust. That mindset may not look glamorous, but it creates something extremely powerful: self-reliance. And self-reliance is the foundation of every great founder. While other kids played games for fun, Brendan was curious about systems. How things worked, how platforms connected, how software could scale without limits. He wasn't just using technology, he was studying it, quietly, obsessively. But it creates something extremely powerful: self-reliance. And self-reliance is the foundation of every great founder. While other kids played games for fun, Brendan was curious about systems. How things worked, how platforms connected, how software could scale without limits. He wasn't just using technology, he was studying it, quietly, obsessively. Because some kids chase entertainment, and some kids chase understanding. The second group changes the world. Here's something interesting about many young tech billionaires. They don't grow up dreaming about being rich. They grow up obsessed with solving problems. Money is just a side effect. And Brendan wasn't thinking, how do I become a billionaire? He was thinking, why is hiring broken? Why is talent hard to find? Why are companies so inefficient? These questions seem small, but small frustrations often lead to billion-dollar ideas. By the time most teenagers were worried about grades, Brendan was already thinking like an operator. How do systems scale? How do platforms grow? How do you build something once and let millions use it? That's not normal teenage thinking, that's founder thinking, and founders aren't born, they're conditioned. Conditioned to see inefficiency, conditioned to feel uncomfortable with broken systems. Conditioned to believe, there must be a better way. But here's the truth nobody talks about. Being wired like this is not always easy. It's lonely, you think differently, you question everything, you're never satisfied, you're never relaxed. Because your brain is always scanning, what can be improved, what can be automated, what can be built better? That restlessness isn't anxiety, it's ambition. And ambition, when trained early, becomes unstoppable. Long before Mercor, long before AI headlines, long before billion-dollar valuations, Brendan Foody had already developed the one thing money can't buy: mental toughness. The ability to sit with uncertainty, to work without guarantees, to move forward without applause, because startups don't reward talent. They reward endurance, and endurance is built in childhood, not adulthood. And soon that mindset would be tested, harder than he ever imagined. Because the next phase of his life would force him to make a decision most people are too afraid to make. A decision that separates employees from founders, safety or risk, comfort or conviction, college or building something that might completely fail. And that's where the real story begins. College is where most people play safe. It's where parents say, get a degree, find a stable job, don't take risks yet. It's where dreams quietly become practical, but for some people, college does the opposite. It doesn't make them safer. It makes them restless, and Brendan Foody was one of those people. While most students were thinking about exams, internships, weekend plans, Brendan was thinking about something else entirely. Systems, scale, leverage. He wasn't asking, how do I get hired? He was asking, why is hiring so broken in the first place? And that single question would eventually turn into a billion-dollar company. Here's something interesting about future founders. They see problems that everyone else has already accepted. Normal people say, "That's just how it works." Founders say, "That makes no sense, there has to be a better way." And Brendan kept noticing something strange. Companies were struggling to hire talent. At the same time, millions of skilled people couldn't find the right opportunities. On one side, employers desperate. On the other, talent invisible between them. Slow processes, manual screening, human bias, outdated systems. In a world powered by AI, hiring still looked like 1995. That didn't sit right with him. Most people complain, few people build, and builders think differently. They don't ask, "Who will fix this?" They ask, "Why not me?" Around this time, AI was quietly evolving. Machine learning models were getting smarter. Automation was improving. Data was everywhere. But nobody had fully applied AI to one very specific problem, matching the right humans to the right work. Not resumes, not keywords, not guesswork, real capability, real skill, real output. And Brendan saw something others missed. If AI could recognize faces, drive cars, write code, then why couldn't it identify talent better than humans? Why couldn't software decide who's actually good at their job? That thought changed everything. But ideas are cheap. Execution is rare. Lots of students have startup ideas. Most never act, because action requires something painful, risk, real risk, not motivational quote risk. Actual consequences, embarrassment, failure, wasted time, money loss, people doubting you. And Brendan stood at that exact crossroads. Picture this. You're young, you're in college. Your path is clear. Graduate, get a safe job, earn slowly. Or drop your focus on the traditional route and build something that might collapse in months. No guarantees, no safety net, no applause, just uncertainty. Most people choose comfort. Because comfort feels responsible. But here's the truth nobody tells you. Comfort rarely builds billion-dollar companies. Pressure does. This is where mindset shows up again. All those years of conditioning, discipline, self-reliance, quiet problem-solving, they prepared him for this moment. Because when you grow up learning, no one will save you. You solve your own problems. You endure pressure. Taking a risk doesn't feel crazy. It feels natural. So instead of waiting for permission, Brendan started building. Not pitching, not announcing, building. That's another difference with real founders. They don't start with hype. They start with prototypes. Late nights, messy code, broken systems, testing, fixing. Repeating, while others were partying, he was refining. While others were networking, he was debugging. Because progress doesn't happen loudly, it happens quietly. He began shaping what would later become Mercor. A platform powered by AI, designed to evaluate people not by resumes, but by real ability. Think about how radical that is. Not where you studied, not who you know. Not fancy credentials, but what can you actually do? For decades, hiring was based on signals. Mercor wanted truth, and truth is uncomfortable, but truth is powerful. At first, nobody really noticed, and that's how most billion-dollar ideas start. Small, unimpressive, almost invisible, no headlines. No investors chasing you, just you and your belief that this might work. That phase is the hardest, because there's no validation, no proof, only faith in your own thinking. Most people quit here. Because silence feels like failure. But Brendan didn't quit, because he wasn't chasing attention. He was chasing accuracy. He wasn't trying to look successful, he was trying to be effective. This is the part YouTube never shows. Not the funding announcements, not the billion-dollar valuation. But the months where nothing works, nothing grows, nothing is certain, just quiet persistence. And persistence is where future billionaires are separated from everyone else. Slowly, something started happening. Companies began testing the platform. Results looked promising. AI could actually predict talent performance. Better than humans, faster than humans, cheaper than humans. And suddenly, the crazy idea didn't look so crazy anymore, it looked inevitable. But success doesn't arrive smoothly. Because just when things start working, reality tests you even harder. Money problems, scaling issues, doubt. Competition, near collapse, because building a startup is not a straight line. It's chaos. And Brendan was about to enter the most brutal phase of all. The phase where most startups die. The phase where optimism meets reality. The phase where Mercor almost didn't make it. And this is where his real test begins. Here's the part nobody posts on LinkedIn. Here's the part you never see in headlines. Here's the part that separates startup dreamers from real founders. Because building a billion-dollar company doesn't start with success. It starts with doubt, and sometimes it starts with almost losing everything. When Mercor officially began taking shape, it didn't look like a future unicorn. It looked fragile, a few people, limited money, unstable systems, unproven technology, no billion-dollar valuation, no investors fighting to join, just uncertainty. And uncertainty is heavy. Especially when you're young, because at 22, most people are still figuring out life. But Brendan, he wasn't figuring out life. He was responsible for a company, for employees, for salaries, for expectations. That weight hits differently. There's something people don't understand about startups. It's not exciting most of the time, it's terrifying. Every day feels like, will we survive another month? Not, how big will we become? The early days aren't glamorous, they're survival mode. Mercor faced problems almost immediately. The AI wasn't perfect. Matching talent sounds simple in theory, but in reality, human skills are messy, people don't fit into clean boxes, data is incomplete, bias creeps in, predictions fail, and when predictions fail, trust disappears. Companies don't care how cool your AI is, they care if it works, every single time. Some early clients left, some pilots failed, some matches didn't perform well, and every failure hit hard. Because when you're small, every mistake feels fatal. There's no cushion, no backup, no we'll fix it next quarter. It's fix it tonight, or lose the customer tomorrow. Imagine being 22 years old and realizing your entire company might collapse because of one wrong decision. That kind of pressure breaks most people. It breaks sleep, it breaks confidence, it breaks relationships. Because startups don't just test your intelligence, they test your emotional endurance. This is where childhood conditioning shows up again. Remember earlier? The discipline, the hardship, the figure-it-out-yourself mentality. Those weren't random experiences, they were training. Because now, instead of panicking, Brendan did something different. He didn't complain, he didn't blame the market, he didn't say, the timing is bad. He asked one simple question. What are we doing wrong? Radical accountability. The most painful but most powerful trait a founder can have. Most people protect their ego, founders kill their ego. Because ego says, it's not my fault. Builders say, everything is my responsibility. And that mindset changes everything. So while other startups might sugarcoat problems, Mercor went deeper. They rebuilt models, improved training data, refined algorithms, tested relentlessly. Day after day, night after night, quiet work, no applause, just progress. There's a moment every startup hits, a dark moment, when the bank account gets low. Really low, when payroll is coming but revenue is, when investors hesitate, when the team looks at you silently, waiting for answers you don't fully have. That's the moment where founders either quit or level up, and Mercor hit that moment. Hard, for a short period it genuinely felt like, this might not work, not dramatically. Not emotionally, just logically. Math didn't look good, time was short, margins were tight, this wasn't a movie. This was reality, and reality doesn't care about dreams, it cares about execution. Here's something interesting about pressure. It reveals who you really are. Under comfort, everyone looks confident. Under stress, truth appears, and under stress, Brendan didn't freeze, he focused, calmly, methodically, like someone who had been here before, like someone trained for chaos. Because remember, this wasn't his first time facing pressure. His entire life had prepared him for uncomfortable situations. So instead of reacting emotionally, he did what engineers do. He solved problems, one by one, cut unnecessary costs, improve product accuracy, talk directly to customers, fix what's broken, repeat. No drama, just systems, because panic wastes energy. Systems create survival. This is the part most people never see. The almost failed chapter. But here's the secret, almost every billion-dollar company has this phase. Amazon had it, Nvidia had it, Tesla had it, and Mercor had it too. The difference isn't intelligence, it's endurance. How long can you stay in the fight when nothing looks promising? Slowly, something started changing. The AI improved, accuracy went up, companies saw better hiring results. Word spread, not because of marketing, because of performance, and performance travels fast, especially in tech. Because engineers don't care about hype, they care about results. One good client became 2, 2 became 5. 5 became 10. Then suddenly, the same system that almost collapsed started compounding. And compounding is magical because growth feels slow until it feels unstoppable. But the most important transformation wasn't external, it was internal. By surviving this phase, Brendan wasn't just building a company, he was building something else: confidence. Not fake confidence, not motivational confidence, but earned confidence, the kind that only comes from surviving near failure. The kind that says, if we made it through that, we can handle anything. And that confidence, that's what turns startups into empires. Soon, investors would notice. The tech world would pay attention, and the company that almost died would suddenly look inevitable. But what happens next is the part nobody could have predicted. Because Mercor wasn't just going to survive, it was about to explode. There's a strange moment in every startup story. A moment where, after months of chaos, after sleepless nights, after almost quitting, things quietly begin to work. Not dramatically. Not overnight, just less resistance. Fewer fires, more traction. And suddenly, the same company that once felt fragile starts feeling inevitable. That's exactly what happened to Mercor. The AI got smarter, not magically. Not instantly, but through thousands of small improvements. Better data, cleaner signals. Stronger models, more feedback. Day by day, mistakes decreased. Accuracy increased. And for the first time, companies weren't just trying Mercor. They were depending on it. That's the difference. Trying is optional. Depending is permanent. Hiring managers began noticing something strange. The candidates Mercor recommended performed better, stayed longer, delivered more value. The AI wasn't guessing anymore. It was predicting. Better than humans, faster than teams, at scale. And when something saves companies time and money, word spreads fast, especially in tech. One client became 10, 10 became 50. 50 became hundreds, and then something powerful happened. Investors started calling, not the other way around. Because in Silicon Valley, traction is louder than pitching. When your product works, money chases you, not the opposite. Suddenly, the same 22-year-old founder who once worried about survival was sitting across from serious investors. Discussing valuations most people only see in headlines. Millions, then hundreds of millions, then billions. A number so big it almost feels unreal, but here's what's interesting. The money wasn't the biggest change. The mindset was, because when you've already faced near collapse, success doesn't make you arrogant, it makes you careful. When you've already seen how fast things can break, you don't celebrate too long, you stay sharp. And Brendan didn't suddenly become flashy, didn't start chasing status. Didn't try to look like a billionaire, because remember, he was never chasing money. He was chasing solutions, and that's why the company kept growing. While others built hype, Mercor built systems. While others chased headlines, Mercor improved performance. And while the world suddenly labeled him young billionaire, AI prodigy, next tech genius, he quietly kept working. Because titles don't build companies, execution does. Here's where tech lovers should really pay attention. Mercor wasn't just another startup, it represented something bigger. A shift. For decades, human potential was judged manually. Resumes, interviews, gut feelings, bias, but now AI could evaluate skill directly, objectively, at scale. This wasn't just software. This was infrastructure for the future of work. And infrastructure businesses become giants because everyone depends on them. Think about it. If AI can match the best engineers, the best designers, the best operators to the right companies instantly, it doesn't just save time, it changes the entire economy. And that's when you realize Mercor wasn't small thinking. It was system thinking, exactly like we saw earlier, from childhood, from college, from Stanford, from every struggle, everything connected. But here's the most important part of this story. And it's not the billion-dollar valuation. It's not the investors, it's not the AI, it's this. Nothing about this was luck. Nothing about this was random. It was conditioning, the same pattern we saw before. Pressure, right arrow, resilience, resilience, right arrow, endurance, endurance, right arrow, success. The same formula we saw with Jensen Huang. The same formula we see with almost every billionaire. Because billionaires aren't built in comfort, they're built in challenge. When Brendan faced failure, he didn't panic because childhood trained him. When Mercor nearly collapsed, he didn't quit because pressure felt familiar. When others doubted AI hiring, he didn't hesitate because long-term thinking was already wired in. That's the real story, not genius, not luck, not magic, mindset. Installed early, tested often, refined through struggle, and maybe that's the most powerful lesson of all. Because people love to say they're special, they're different, they're gifted, but stories like this prove something else. They're not special, they're prepared. Prepared to endure what others won't, prepared to stay when others quit. Prepared to work when nobody is watching, and preparation is something anyone can build. So if you look at Brendan Foody today, AI billionaire, founder, tech leader. It's easy to think the story started with success, but now you know the truth. It started much earlier with pressure, with sacrifice, with discipline. With quiet problem solving, long before Mercor, long before AI headlines, long before money. Because success doesn't begin at the top, it begins in the mind. Soft music slows, reflective tone, so what raised Brendan Foody? Not money, not connections, not luck, but parental expectations, early responsibility, engineering thinking, relentless execution, failure after failure, and the refusal to quit. That's how a 22-year-old built an AI billion-dollar company. Not overnight, but over years of invisible preparation. If this story changed the way you see success, if you realized billionaires aren't born, they're built, and if you want more deep stories that connect parenting, mindset, struggle, and technology, then subscribe. Because on this channel, we don't chase hype. We break down the psychology, the pressure, and the hidden foundations behind the people shaping our world.